Hi everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. This is Kathy. I am back with two more cards using the Mae the Mouse stamp set from Honeybee Stamps, only this time there is no mouse. I wanted to use all the things, all the little bits and pieces in this set, and the easiest way to do that, of course, is to just create a background. So I started out by arranging some of the stamps onto an acrylic block, and then used an anti-static pouch on my cardstock because I plan on doing some heat embossing. I stamped the images using Memento Luxe Wedding Dress ink, and I stamped that onto a piece of 80-pound Nina Solar White cardstock. Just did random stamping and then coated it with clear embossing powder and heat set it. Once that half was done, I flipped it around and finished up the stamping and the embossing. Then I move on to the ink blending. I started out with Seedless Preserves Distress Oxide ink and just did somewhat of a light coat the first time, moved on to Picked Raspberry for my second color and Spun Sugar for my third color. I put a sticky note down there to keep from having fingerprints in the part that I already inked. I do tend to go over, I do the ink blending twice, typically on projects that I do, just to make sure that I get a really good blend between the colors. Once I was done with that, I buffed it off with the sleeve of my sweatshirt, which is a designated crafting sweatshirt. I have a couple of those. Most people use soft cloth. I didn't have one, so I used my sweatshirt. Then to activate it, I wanted to add some water, and when it comes to splattering, I'm not good at it with a paintbrush or with a spray bottle. It always seems to be too concentrated. So I actually use a toothbrush. And I dip the bristles in the water and then just run my thumb along the bristles and it splatters the water, and I have a little bit more control about where they're going to go. I also used some Perfect Pearls just to get just a little bit of shimmer. And then I set that aside to dry. While that was drying, I started working on the sentiments, which come from the Brie Mine stamp set. And I stamped them kind of wonky here because I do plan on die cutting everything. But one of the tricks that I wanted to share with you, particularly about that word Valentine, is in the stamp set there is an S that is separate. So you can add it to the word Valentine so you can get Valentines. And of course there's a coordinating die. And I figured that the easiest way to get that S lined up just right was to put the die down on top of the stamped word, put the S in the die, and then stamp it. And it lined up quite nicely. The ink that I used to stamp the sentiments was also the Seedless Preserves Distress Oxide ink, which I often forget that they stamp very nicely. So after I got that done, the background was pretty much dry, so I used the Stacking Hearts dies from Honeybee Stamps to cut a heart out of the center of my background. And after I cut that out, I had two pieces so that I could create two cards. I cut out 3 white hearts, and I did use 110-pound cardstock for that, and the top heart I ran through with an embossing folder just to get a little bit of texture. And I stacked those 3 hearts up using liquid glue, and that is going to fit right into the center of my background. And of course I used my stitch rectangle die for the background. Added an obscene amount of adhesive on the back of that and put that on the front of a top folding note card. I had a bubble, so I had to lift it up and kind of straighten that out a bit. Once I had that adhered, I placed the heart on the inside, and I stacked it just so that I would have just a little bit more dimension for those hearts on the front. After that, it was foam tape on the sentiments, and in hindsight, it would have been so much easier to just die cut the word Valentine's like 3 or 4 times and stack them than to try and get foam tape cut that small. And it probably would have been a lot faster to do it with the stacking as well. But that's neither here nor there. I did foam tape on all of the sentiments and then just adhered it to the front of the card. And I actually put down the word Valentine's first so that I could have that somewhat centered-ish in the heart. And that was how I kind of gauged where my spacing would be for to add the word happy and day. I did run the happy and day through with a fishtail banner and then just trimmed them down. Even after I ran them through, they were still a little bit wide, so I just, used my scissors to trim them to make them a little bit more narrow. Slap those on the front of the card, and that finishes up card number 1. For card number 2, I die cut a piece of white cardstock using a stitched fishtail banner and then just stamped Happy Heart Day using Seedless Preserved Distress Oxide ink. And to get the word heart, I actually performed a little bit of surgery on one of the sentiments in the set. I just snipped it apart. I ran a piece of white cardstock through with an embossing folder, and to make sure that it gets stuck really well, I used an adhesive sheet from, I think it's Scrapbook Adhesives, and burnished that with an acrylic block before I peeled off the backing to put it on the front of my note card, which of course is the A2 card. That's just my standard size. And of course I ran that through with the stitched rectangle as well. Then I adhered the die cut heart from the background onto a, I guess it's like a dark raspberry heart, and I just used one die up from the stacking hearts so I could have a nice outline background, and then coated the back of that heart with foam tape, added foam tape to the sentiment and slapped that on the front, and that finishes up the second card. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, I'd love it if you would, and we'll see you next time.